This is the Scuba Educational Alliance Ocean Podcast, Episode 28. The Scuba Educational Alliance Ocean Podcast is a bi-weekly podcast dedicated to the world of scuba diving, ocean health, sustainability, and fostering a new generation of ocean stewards through diving education. Well, hello again, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to today's podcast. I'm Jeff Centropino, your host, and also the founder and president of the Scuba Educational Alliance of Connecticut. And our mission is to foster a new generation of ocean stewards through scuba diving training and education. We're working to break down the financial barriers that young people face when looking to become scuba divers. Now, I don't know about you, but this time of year is probably my favorite time. We've had decent warm weather with low humidity, and it drops down in temperature overnight, making for some great sleeping weather. October in New England can get cold, but hopefully that won't come until the end of the month. And that's when I'll get back from Indonesia and the Philippines. Yes, we leave on Saturday for Singapore and then on to North Sulawesi for 9 days at Dive into Lembeh. And then after that, we head to the Philippines for a week at Atlantis Dumaguete. 3 weeks away for some hopefully spectacular diving in the Coral Triangle. So with that, the podcast will take a little break until I get back, and I'll catch you up on that trip right before I head down to Orlando for the DEMA show. Certainly been a very busy fall. As I mentioned last time on the show, I'm now only going to have one segment. That means that the shows will be a little shorter, perhaps in the 10 to 15 minute range. Maybe a little shorter when I'm pressed for time. Seems like life has gotten so much busier since we sold the dive shop. But I think it'll make the show a little more focused. Okay, the last time on the podcast, I talked about one of the many perils that the ocean is facing, climate change, and why I don't think it's a con job, as some may call it. It's real, it's scary, and it's accelerating. So today I want to dive into another peril that is also real, scary, and accelerating: plastic pollution in the ocean. Now, I decided to focus on this topic based on a September newsletter put out by Oceana's National Business Coalition for the Oceans. I think I mentioned the coalition before here on the podcast, as we are a member of this group. Oceana has been at the forefront of trying to combat plastic pollution in the oceans for many years and supports programs and legislation to address this critical situation. The September edition was focused on a deep dive on reuse and refill, which are two key tools in the fight against plastic pollution. I guess with reuse and refill, you won't have to make as much single-use plastics like straws, cups, and bags. Let's start with one of the items that they talked about: why reducing plastic is good for business. They start with the problem. More than 40% of all plastic produced today is used for packaging, and an estimated 15 million metric tons of plastic enters the ocean each year. Okay, but what about recycling that plastic? Big problem here because only 9% of all the plastic waste ever generated has been recycled. Even if we were to up our recycling capabilities, production and waste will far outpace what we can take out of the environment. Now, it's very difficult to validate some of the numbers on the estimated losses to fisheries, tourism, and infrastructure operations each year due to plastic. But they pegged the number at $13 billion. And here's an estimate that I thought was pretty interesting. Restaurants and food service businesses are spending $24 billion on disposable items each year, with an estimated $6 billion incurred to businesses and city governments on the solid waste management and disposal of food packaging alone. I thought about those numbers a bit, and I'm not sure how they count disposable items, because not all disposable items are plastics, things like napkins, paper towels, paper plates, etc. So that might be a little deceiving, but I guess a very large part of that 24 billion is plastic products. Now, there is some discussion on how many food service industry jobs could be created with reuse. I'm not sure how they came up with that estimate, but it's close to 200,000. And here's another tough one to nail down. They say that in 2019, 61% of internet users surveyed said they prefer to support companies that protect the environment, and 72% said that sustainable packaging is an important factor in their decision to purchase products. Now, here's one that baffles me, especially when it comes to how we elect leadership. Oceana found that in a nationwide poll that 77% of surveyed registered voters agreed that companies need to stop producing and using so much single-use plastic. And 78% agreed that companies should offer the plastic-free options. Now, here's the problem with this. We've seen this when people are asked about issues regarding the environment. They appear to be supportive of the conservation efforts. However, when it comes to who we elect in the government, well, that's a whole different story. All the statistics about how many jobs would be created, how much money would be saved, and how much profit potentially could be gained go out the window. We talked about that in episode 25, Plastic, Profit, and Power. Businesses and consumers need comprehensive legislation that would phase out unnecessary single-use plastic products. And that's not going to happen anytime soon. Right now, the U.S. is in the midst of a government shutdown. It's been over a week now. Somewhere along the line, we will end the shutdown, and there will be little appetite for environmental legislation in the foreseeable future. But that doesn't mean we stop trying. And that's what Senator Jeff Merkley from Oregon did in June with his introduction of the Reuse Act of 2025. I always love how they name bills. Reuse is short for Research for Environmental Use and Sustainable Economies. Now, all they are asking for here is that the Environmental Protection Agency prepare a report on reuse and refill systems. Seems reasonable, but reasonableness doesn't exist anymore. So that got me wanting to check on another bill that is in both the House and Senate, the Farewell to Foam Act 2025. You guessed it, no action on either since they were introduced in March 2025. Now, I mentioned the EPA's role in the Reuse Act, and I thought I'd go out and see what the EPA had to say about plastic pollution. Well, the page on plastic and plastic pollution was last updated in November 2024. And just a few short months ago, they acknowledged that plastic pollution continues to rise and is predominantly from single-use containers and packaging, namely bags, wraps, and bottles. They also state that the U.S. consumed 18% of global plastic products in 2019, and plastic use per capita was higher in the United States than any other country globally. And they stated a harsh reality. Without intervention, global plastic use and waste will almost triple by 2060. But back in November 2024, the EPA had a strategy for how they could work collaboratively with U.S. states, tribal units, territories, local governments, industry and trade organizations, community organizations, NGOs, academia, and consumers to prevent plastic pollution. That's the National Strategy to Prevent Plastic Pollution. And I talked about that in depth in episode 12, way back in February 2025. I was surprised to see that all of this information was still available on the EPA website, as so much information has gone dark. I'm guessing they just haven't gotten around to that yet. I guess let's just get rid of all the climate change stuff first and work our way down. I'm definitely having a difficult time with the current administration's assault on the environment, and it's trickling down to the local levels. Here's an example. I know one of our local divers who is also an accomplished artist. She takes trash and creates various pieces of art, sometimes political figures, but she also does an incredible array of fish life with trash that she takes from the ocean. Very creative, and she does shows around the Northeast. Well, recently she was set to have her underwater fish life displayed in a local library, but they had constraints. Her work could not include the terms climate change or global warming. They told her that the language needed to be neutral. I guess that's their prerogative, but when a library tells you what language you could use, wow. Needless to say, she did not display at that library. We've come that far. I know that grassroots efforts to reduce the use of plastics can help, but it's not going to be enough. We need legislation like the Farewell to Foam Act 2025 or the Reuse Act of 2025, plus the implementation of the National Strategy to Prevent Plastic Pollution to be set in motion. It might be worth asking those who are asking for your vote where they stand, or do they think like climate change and plastic pollution problems are a big con job? Well, that wraps up this latest episode. Once again, thanks for listening. Now, it's time to make my final preparations for Indonesia and the Philippines. I'll be gone until the end of the month, so I'll talk to you again in November. Till then, take care, everyone. This has been the Scuba Educational Alliance Ocean Podcast, a show dedicated to the world of scuba diving, ocean health, sustainability, and fostering a new generation of ocean stewards through diving education. Talk to you again real soon.